Look, I think it's important. We're part of a coalition of this. Of course it is. And, we've seen how strongly the international community came to our defence when we asked for it around Salisbury. So it's right that we make it very clear that we will stand shoulder to shoulder with France and the US, that we need to be careful. We need to look at the evidence. We need to have a careful and considered approach. But look, I think, but I also accept that, if you don't come out as a government and advocate as to what is actually going on, you are going to leave the space open for statements like we've seen from Jeremy Corbyn that are going to start to make the process very difficult. I accept that, yes.
So what would you have liked to have heard from the Prime Minister and others then that would have filled that gap?
Well, it's not necessarily to do with the Prime Minister, but I think, in times like this, you do expect comments to be given that give, a bit of an understanding around what is happening within the government, what the thinking is, what's going on, and certainly the things that are being taken into consideration, because suddenly, people like me look pretty isolated when we say, look, chemical weapons, you should not go unchallenged in 2018. But beyond that, there's no real sort of meat on the bone. So, look, I'm sure these discussions are going on behind the scenes. The National Security Council established after Iraq met yesterday, and the Cabinet was clear yesterday when it came out. But we do need to, I think, as political leaders, sort of get out there and advocate what it is about Syria, what we're trying to do in Syria. Otherwise, we end up in this position where, the view is that you can suddenly have a clean and quick outcome, and we're going to end the civil war and so on, which is fundamentally not the case and is never going to happen. What we are trying to do is send a very clear message around chemical weapons, as we should, and there's a clear moral case for that. I look forward to the government taking action in that direction.
What about proof in all of this? I mean, look, the pictures were hugely distressing. We saw the raw footage here, and it was too awful to broadcast, images you can't unsee, frankly. But we don't have definitive proof. Jeremy Corbyn saying send in the UN to look at this. Now, that's happened before. Why can't that happen again?
Look, Jeremy Corbyn's sort of scale on proof, I'm afraid, is a little bit different to mine. I think if you've seen the President of France saying he has the proof, the security services, saying they have the proof, the Prime Minister is absolutely unequivocal on this. Now, if you think that we can sort of lock down the area, go in, take photographs, present the case, to the world, that suddenly and everyone's going to be convinced there's chemical weapons, again, it's just never going to happen. We have to. We have a National Security Council. We have our intelligence services. They make the assessment, and then we act upon that. I totally understand why, since Iraq, everything is viewed through that prism, and catastrophic mistakes are made in that. But if we just sit here and constantly self-flagellate over our intelligence services getting it wrong in Iraq, and then never really take action on the world stage again, I'm afraid I don't think that is the Britain that the British people want to see. We have a history of doing what is right, is standing up for those who have been so sort of abused, exploited and murdered by their leaders, as President Assad is doing, aided and abetted by Putin at the moment. We have a duty to stand up, and I think the British people expect us to do that. I absolutely understand the reticence to get involved, but at the same time, we have to be clear, we have to be concise, we have to be calculated and stand up for those who are on the receiving end of this barbaric treatment from President Assad, supported by Russia and Iran.
But in terms of that duty, what about the Commons having a say? We've had Nigel Nelson on the show this morning, the political editor of The Mirror, as you know, who said there really is a need, in his view, for collective responsibility across the House on this. It's a vote Theresa May is likely to win if Jeremy Corbyn gave Labour members a free vote.
No, I agree with you, and I absolutely think parliamentarians and parliamentary scrutiny and those having a say is important. I do not believe that should be the binary way that we conduct foreign policy or national security. If you look at how these decisions are made, you will clearly get some intelligence that is put in the public domain. You will get a lot of intelligence that is not in the public domain, will not be made clear to members of parliament, and rightly so, because it will burn assets that we can't use again and make this country less safe. But the Prime Minister and the National Security Council, they see all of that and they make the decision. And we're a democracy. We elect them. We elect the Prime Minister, and they make that decision. Now, should we, of course, have a debate about that with the Prime Minister in Parliament? Parliament is fundamentally important in this. MPs absolutely must have their say. But the idea that is binding and the Prime Minister then has her freedom of movement limited by not going to Parliament, I think is not good for the country, and it's not the right thing to do.
There's a complication in all of this, isn't there, which is Russia. The idea that in any sort of action like this, it's a horrible phrase, collateral damage. It is going to happen. We know that no one is going to want to kill any Russians in this because of the implications. It's impossible to say that that wouldn't happen. We've got to look at the wider implications here and what this could escalate into, don't we?
Absolutely, we do. And people expect, the leaders of the country to do that. It is possible to target the Assad regime and specifically go after chemical stockpiles and things like that, making sure that we do not involve the Russians. We're very, very careful. There's a deconfliction line there. It is possible to separate one from the other. Now, clearly, things go wrong, and everybody knows that. But, we can make pretty robust and clear steps to make sure that doesn't happen, and we can have targeted, very clear action against President Assad and his chemical weapons to make a very clear signal, not only to him, which is important around chemical weapons, but across the world. We've just seen what's happened in Salisbury. We've seen an emboldening of Putin ever since 2013, really. And I'm afraid these people will keep going until we stand up and we stop them, and we make it very clear what we stand for in the West, and what we believe is right and wrong. And the time now is to do that.
You understand these things more than most of us because of your previous life, your previous career. What about the timings in all of this? Obviously, Syria's been put on alert by the tweets from Donald Trump, by obviously the announcement out of the cabinet last night. Action looks inevitable in some form or another. Would it then matter if that action was delayed till after the weekend?
No, I don't think it would. Look, the idea is people get very emotional about this. They see the images, they want to act straight away, and I totally understand that. But the reality is that I suspect we'll come up with a package of measures, some of which will include sanctions, some of which will include targeting, and these take time to build up, and it takes time to build up the political will for a coalition, and it's really important to do these things, to build that sort of political consensus that we stand as one and we say this is not an acceptable way to carry on your business. So I understand that people would have liked to have seen something by now, or they now think the whole momentum is slowing down. I don't think it is. I think there's a lot of work going on in the background, working out what we need to do to achieve the effect of making sure that anybody across the world realizes that the use of chemical weapons in this way is not acceptable, and particularly clearly to President Assad. I mean, this conflict has gone on for 7-8 years now. If you can just imagine, if you can imagine what it's like being in these suburbs, in these cities, and dealing with this on a daily basis, I find it extraordinary, the sort of reticence and the lack of sort of moral compass to sort of stand up and say, look, this is not a tenable situation in 2018 where someone like President Assad can gas kids in their own home, and we will not stand up and demonstrate, not only say but demonstrate that this is not an acceptable way to carry on.